Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is the cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we'll be doing a little bit of an update to the box office numbers for this weekend, as finally now the numbers.com is back up and running. And as you all know, I do like to use the adjusted for inflation feature on that website to try and keep things as even as I possibly can, because we do have a bit of a better idea about how Avatar: The Way of Water is projected to match the box office totals as of the time of the same time in release as Rogue One, which is very much indicating that this film will far outpace Rogue One if the numbers continue on the way that they are. That's the big question mark, of course, is it going to be able to hold this non-holiday weekend and all the non-holiday weekends after? Especially with such big competition, and I say that sarcastically, from films like Megan, which apparently some people have actually seen and said that it's not all that terrible. Again, I will, I will wait with bated breath on that one, simply because when it comes to January films, especially January horror films, they tend not to be very good. But again, I, of course, am willing to concede to those who actually have seen the movie whether or not the film is good or not, especially for those that are fans of the horror genre, as I personally am not. Well, we also have to give an update and talk about the Wednesday Raven Awards. For those that have never been a part of this channel for a while, you maybe have missed this, but every year I host a Oscars boycott, as we boycott mainstream nonsense Hollywood. We do our own award show the same time. We release our nominations the same time as well. Again, it is fully a boycott of the Oscars, because ultimately they don't really represent what is actually good or bad in film anymore. They've become so obsessed with that identity politics that ultimately the films that they nominate end up being films that either, one, no one has ever seen, or two, films that really aren't all that good, but because they happen to check off all of those little boxes, they get a lot of attention for that reason. And so we'll talk a little bit about right now how there is a current poll, or a current ballot that you can fill out. Today, right now we are determining the categories, whether or not we should change any of the categories that have been used for the last few years. I always like to kind of get the feelings of those who participate in the Raven Awards, whether or not they want to change any of the categories or not. So you'll have a voice in that. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then also, of course, we will very soon be taking nominations for those categories and then compiling those nominations into whoever gets the most nominations in a given category. And then eventually we will have the actual nominees released towards the end of January. But before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, lap that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and smash the rumble button as well. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So I'd already talked about this in my box office preview for the weekend, that Megan is expected to open at $26 million off of a $12 million budget. That's pretty good. Avatar: Way of Water is projected to continue its dominance at the top of the box office with $36.1 million, bringing its projected domestic total to $506.4 million. Now, the inflation chart that I had been using, the inflation calculator that I had been using, again, whether or not it's more accurate or not than the numbers is beyond me, because when it comes to trying to actually figure out what exactly the inflationary number is, especially in the midst of the economy that we are currently in, it's really hard to say. But I do try to use the inflation calculator on the numbers, and I try to use that consistently, so that way there's at least some legitimacy, or rather some consistency amongst all of the films. And so it would be unfair for me to just use some random site's generation of inflation numbers versus the same one that I've been using for all of the others. And it's interesting to say the very least. And so one of the things that I've been tracking, of course, is the domestic comps, right? The comparable numbers here between Avatar: The Way of Water and Rogue One. Someone in the comment section at one point said, "Shut up about inflation." Well, I'm not, because it is relevant, seeing that, again, ticket prices today are much higher than they were then. So the number of tickets being sold for a movie like Rogue One, actually by the end of it, are going to be probably somewhat comparable domestically. But also, even more so, the amount that it costs per ticket, right, is so much higher that we have to take these things into account in order for them to be fair, right? Today's dollar is not worth the same as in previous years. And so when you compare Rogue One: A Star Wars Story to Avatar: The Way of Water, just to show you all, right, I have the little adjusted for inflation tool checked off there. As of right now, as far as the numbers that we've been given as the recording of this video, the Wednesday numbers had this film at $464 million. That is for Avatar: The Way of Water, with $478.5 million for Rogue One. Now, the big question mark is going to be, will it be able to catch up and pass that number of Rogue One by this Sunday? And the answer is basically yes, right? So based off of this charting, right, based off of this adjustment calculator, it's saying that at the time of its release, by its fourth Sunday, Rogue One had made $506 million in the domestic market, with right now the Box Office Pro numbers saying it'll be at 506.4. It means that it'll officially And I know that there's other websites already that have kind of already covered this, but once again, they don't adjust for inflation, and that I think is a major flaw to their system because it is leaving out a very key factor because, again, numbers then don't mean the same as they do now. The dollar is not the same, and also the change in number of tickets being sold is not being truly reflected. That all being said, though, this film will indeed catch up and pass, according to projections, the domestic box office for Rogue One, and so if that film continues to trend ahead of where Rogue One was, and that'll be a very interesting number to follow. That could indicate that the film's end domestic results could be well north of $650 million by the end of it. We already know that the film's going to make well over $1 billion as it already has crossed $1 billion here at the international box office. The question is just how much more money does it make? As I've said before, I originally thought the range was going to be $1.5 to $2 billion. Then we actually had the second weekend numbers, and of course, holiday frame probably impacted those numbers a bit. So my official charting projections had it between 1.3 or 1.2 and 1.7, but I've said from that very video, don't expect this film to cap out at 1.7 if the legs are strong. The legs have indeed been quite strong for this film, and so therefore this film is going to make probably at least $2 billion. The question is how much higher of over $2 billion does this film actually make? And I can also say and confirm that this film now has crossed $1.56 billion worldwide. Therefore, this film now is the highest grossing film of 2022 to be released in 2022, beating out a much better film in Top Gun Maverick. So I just wanted to give an update on those numbers and also to give an update in that comparison chart and those adjusted for inflation numbers. And we'll continue to follow those numbers as well as the domestic numbers and totals for Top Gun Maverick, because one thing that Top Gun Maverick was able to do, which is the reason why it was so successful, is because it was able to have very strong legs very far out. And so the question is going to be, is this film, I know, River, is this film going to be able to keep up with the Top Gun Maverick numbers at the same point in its release? And if you go ahead and pull up these numbers here, obviously we have Avengers Endgame in the mix, Top Gun Maverick as well, right? At this point in the release, right, we see that the film Top Gun Maverick was behind in its release, but by the fourth Sunday it was at 466, so it's still expected to be behind it's still expected to be behind where Avatar: The Way of Water is going to be. The difference, though, is that if you add up these numbers, 11, 15, and 17, this film will have made more in its fourth weekend than what Avatar is expected to make this weekend. So again, Avatar could make more based on the projections. It could make less based on the projections. We'll have to wait and see. But the point is that if this film, Top Gun Maverick, is going to actually end up trending higher than not just Avengers Endgame, but also even that of Avatar: The Way of Water, we could still be able to see Top Gun Maverick take the top domestic crown. So while Avatar: Way of Water is unequivocally, now at this point officially, the worldwide champion of 2022 as far as the box office is concerned, the domestic box office crown is actually still being fought because Top Gun Maverick ended at $718 million, and the question is going to be, how much will this film... I know, River, I know, she's not a fan of Avatar either. How much is this going to have left in the tank for the film? I know. And again, River, I understand. So let's talk now about changing a bit of the tune here, but I did want to try to get in a video that might get a little bit more attention as Avatar box office tends to these days. Much love to the people in the comments section who are able to be civil at the very least. Again, we are now going into this year's Wednesday Raven Awards, and so if anyone has missed this in the past, this is again our Oscars boycott that we host. For instance, last year we had Best Movie of 2021 ended up going to Spider-Man: No Way Home. This was something voted on by you, the people, and again, I always let these polls be available to people, and I give you the raw scores, etc. So right from 2021, these were the nominees, and so if you're wondering why did this film get on the nominations list, it's not because of me. It's because the people who actually voted in the process, voted during the nomination process. I know, River, I wish more people voted the nomination process as well, because maybe we would get a better selection of films, with films like Zack Snyder's Snyder Cut in there somehow. But as you can see, it was based off of a graded scale, right? A best of 8, a weighted scale. And Spider-Man: No Way Home was easily the winner at 3.45 out of 8 score, right? So it had the highest score as far as, again, ranking 1 to 8. That just means that more people ranked it higher on their list than not. And then the second place was Dune. Third film was Nobody. And then also we have categories like the Kathleen Kennedy Ryan Johnson Award for Excellence in Crap World Building, which is one of my favorite awards just from the title of it alone, as it says, this prestigious award is for those movies that just truly sucked in every single way. And that ended up going to Eternals. And as you can see, some of the other films on that list were Space Jam 2, Don't Look Up, Matrix Resurrections, and Home Sweet Home Alone, which, again, I think all of us can agree were pretty darn awful. Most Overlooked Person, Lifetime Achievement Award went to Willem Dafoe. Best Story and Film went to Spider-Man No Way Home. Best Low Budget Film, again, this is something that I also really, one of the categories I really love on the channel because it is able to, specifically have it be a battle between films that did not cost a whole lot but ended up being pretty darn good. So that film, Nobody, which cost $16 million as of the recording of that video, and again, as of that show, was $16 million. It was very impressive to see a film like Pig on there with $5 million, but again, Pig had some technical issues with the filmmaking process, and so I think ultimately that's probably why that film did not win. So what y'all are going to be able to do is in the pinned comment of this video, I'm going to have a link to this. So this is the Wednesday Raven Awards 2023 category vote. So what y'all are going to be doing is going through the categories, and so we keep the same amount of categories, or at least we used to have the same amount of categories as the Oscars. The Oscars have since decided to combine sound editing and mixing together. We're staying to the old school method. That's how Oscar bowling was able to be done. If you know what Oscar bowling is, you're a champ. You're awesome. But anyway, this is, again, our way of boycotting the Oscars. And so what y'all get to do now, again, y'all will be able to nominate films very, very soon. But for now, we're just going to make sure the categories are set. If you have had a big issue with one of the categories, now is the time to make your voice heard. And again, the way you do that is by actually voting in this. And so you get to vote to keep or drop any of these categories. So whether it's Best Movie of the Year, the Kathleen Kennedy Award, Lifetime Achievement Award, Best Story and Film, Best Low Budget, Worst Remake / Reboot / Sequel / Prequel. Again, putting them all together in the same category because ultimately they're all the same in some way or another. But also we recognize that there's not only bad remakes and reboots, there's also some good ones, right? Sometimes they actually get it right. It's not always the case, but sometimes it is. Most underrated film, most overrated film, amongst many other categories. And so if you want to vote in this, again, this is one of those votes where I have it set to not collect email addresses or anything like that. So please make your voice be heard and decide whether or not to keep or drop a category. If we get to a point, right, I'm going to try and end the voting for this probably on Sunday. So you have until Sunday of this week to finish voting. If by Sunday of this week we have a category where the majority of people have voted that we should drop it, at that point then I will take recommendations on what category should replace it, and we will then go from there, eventually having an open process for people to send in nominations, and then I will again collect those together and put together an official nominees list to be released at the end of January. So it's a process, right? But it's a process that I want y'all to be a part of. It's a process that I try to keep very transparent with everybody, and that's why you can see already 34 people have actually voted in this process. And so far, it's mostly people saying to keep the categories. There's been, again, a few votes here and there for certain categories to say to drop them, but only if a majority of those votes, and I, of course, will share those results once we have finalized them on Sunday. We will, again, if we get to that point where a category has been asked to be dropped, we will then cross that bridge and find a replacement category. So anyway, let me know your thoughts about that, and also the thoughts about Avatar: Way of Water. How much money is this film going to make? Again, I think a $2 billion minimum at this point in time is just the most likely scenario, whether I like it or not. As you all know, I talk about the numbers as objectively as I possibly can, just like I can talk about how this film has made $173 million in China, which means 75% of that goes to the CCP. So millions of dollars going to fund the Communist Party. And also, again, I point that out with almost any other film that gets released in China. So let me know your thoughts about that, and also about this weekend's numbers as well, if you have not already posted with the box office breakdown video, or rather the box office preview video from the other day. And also make sure to check out that that pinned comment to find the link to vote for the Wednesday Raven Award categories, whether to keep or to drop them. And yeah, thank you again for watching, everybody, and smash that like button, laugh that fire button, Aussie, and you're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed feast of the Epiphany of our Lord, the official end day of Christmas. So after today, you can take down all your Christmas decorations. For those who don't know, 12 days of Christmas after Christmas. Again, time to continue the celebration of Christmas. Today is the Feast of the Epiphany, right? We talk about the three kings, the three magi, depending on the translation of Scripture that you are reading. And so this is indeed the day of the Epiphany of Christ to the world. And so it's a great feast to be celebrating today on this also first Friday of the month. So blessed First Friday, blessed Feast of the Epiphany, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my January Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off with my Patreon members, Father Luca Illich, Garrett Searles, Heimir Ari Hymason, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Chat Reviews, who you can check out on his YouTube channel, Orange Chat Reviews, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Miss Martin Muses, and of course the amazing Empress of the Universe, Tina B, who you can check out over on her YouTube channel, Tina B, with her show Soup to Nuts, which she does, tries to do every single week with her friend and with fellow Valkyrie and fellow mod of the channel, Stephanie B. And of course, I do want to give a special shout out to Tina B and make sure that everyone knows that our prayers are being extended towards her as she continues to recover from complications that have occurred recently with her medically and has resulted in a loss of eyesight, or at the very least of more clear eyesight. So to continue to offer our prayers for her. Also a shout out to my Subscribe Star peeps, Matt317, who can check out on his Twitch channel by the same name, The R, Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and the K-Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my Locals members, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer Robert Barnes. So thank you all very much for supporting me on Local, Subscribe Star, and Patreon. If you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, please check out the top link in the video description below, where you get access to this, and also, of course, to a monthly podcast that I do with John the Flick Flickinger. Also, access to a giveaways channel on my Discord, where I give away films this month. I've got films like Seven Samurai on Blu-ray from the Criterion Collection to give away, The Banshees of Inisherin, Tommy Boy Steelbook, Edge of Tomorrow 4K, and tons of other 4Ks and Steelbooks as they get released over the next month will be available, and also, of course, digital codes as well. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out that top link and join over on Patreon, Subscribe Star, or on Locals. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.